at www.financialadvocacypodcast.com. Look both ways for across the street. Let's get started. Well, happy New Year, Kurt. We are here for what is it, week 2 now. Um, Glad to keep on the topic here. We decided we're going to do this financial literacy kind of series here, and I got to tell you, this topic is not one of my favorites. You know, when some it's an interesting thing because when I think of, and I have to put my consumer hat on, right? We always try to think of things from the perspective of the end client. At least I try to. It's not always easy, but I try to. And I think financial planning sounds a whole lot like budgeting. Sounds like savings. It sounds like I've got to punish myself today and do all the things that the financial entertainers tell us to do, which is, save all your money, don't go out to eat, live a miserable life. Am I on track? Does that sound like a lot of the things that you think of when you just hear the term financial planning without other context with it, Kurt?
Oh yeah, I think absolutely. It definitely appears that way, and I think people, naturally their natural tendency is to feel the same way. It's that cliche word that you know you get tired of hearing.
No joke. And so we've got that perspective, which is often perpetuated because we have our financial entertainers out there, Susie, Dave, and others, and they tend to talk a lot about those things. So it's easy to think, well, that's what financial advisors usually talk about. Or they often have the idea that, well, you've got to have a ton of money in order to even meet with somebody to make it worth their while. There's some truth to that. And then there might even be there's a whole nother concept out there, which is there might even feel a sense of shame. It's like,
Yeah,
I haven't done as well. I've really messed up. I do need help, but I'm not where I want to be. And I really empathize with people that might feel a sense of shame, a sense of feeling that they're behind the eight ball, more or less. That's real. And I can imagine, and even though there are some advisors that have minimum requirements, those minimum requirements are usually all about doing my best work for people who can really take advantage of what we do, but not shaming them. It's more like you just not. It's just not going to make mathematical sense for us to work together. That kind of a thing. And so I'm always cautious about that because I'm cautious of that shame. The last thing anybody needs is to have an advisor say you screwed up. Uh, Heaven help me if I ever did that. I would feel very hypocritical because I have not had the life and the financial trajectory that I wish I would have had by this time. I just celebrated my 47th birthday last week. Um, and I'm like, I am not where I want to be. Some of it is business, some of it is life. You never know. Alonzo, brother, glad to see you, my friend. Um, but we've all have a past, more or less. The question becomes is, do we have the right mentalities to take us where we're at today and make the best decisions going forward? And I think that's what we really want to kind of talk about. So I'm going to introduce our guest because we started talking last week or so, and he's been in the Facebook group for quite a while, participating in various ways, and I always appreciate that. And his personal Facebook, well, it's a little more satirical, but it's fun. It makes me laugh a little bit. But let me give a proper introduction here, because Kevin Fink is a certified financial planner, one of those CFPs, but he can freaking produce. I'm just going to throw that out there. Specializing in empowering entrepreneurs, professionals, and executives to achieve financial stability and personal growth with nearly 3 decades of experience. And we're not just talking about working with clients. He has taught the CFP program in Tennessee universities, or excuse me, not Tennessee, Texas University. There's a T in there. I'm there. Okay. But Kevin combines his financial expertise with his mastery of neuro-linguistic programming, NLP. You may have heard of that stuff. That's the stuff that Tony Robbins is pretty much known for, but we're not on that scale. We're bringing it down to the rest of us here. But combining NLP and personal development coaching to help clients break free from limiting beliefs and achieve their potential. Kevin's career highlights include serving as a professor of the University at St. Thomas and the University of Houston, where he taught the financial planning and risk management. He's been a national trainer for Money Tracks. Anybody in financial services, we probably know what we're talking about, who Money Tracks is, with Don Buddy, right? Um, and a thought leader featured at outlets like the Wall Street Journal and Texas Monthly Magazine. In addition to his professional accomplishments, Kevin is a passionate advocate for self-awareness and emotional resilience. Oh man, do we need a lot of that? He integrates forgiveness. Oh, we're gonna have fun with this one, especially if we're gonna talk about self-forgiveness. Oh heck yeah. Where am I at? Integrates forgiveness and the transformative power of love into his coaching practice, helping individuals shift limiting beliefs and unlock abundance. When he's not coaching or teaching, which is the rest. But Kevin enjoys traveling, cooking, golfing. I haven't swung a golf club in 25 years. And spending time with his wife Michelle and their two dogs. So please welcome Kevin Fink. Thank you so much for being here. I think I did that pretty well.
You did it great. You did it great. Thank God for Chat GPT and the ability to write our own introductions, right?
Always helpful when I've been using it more and more lately because I'm writing a course and I'm like, how would I write this? You know what? I'm not going to think about it. Let that thing do the thinking for me. That's kind of the idea.
Exactly. It's much more prosaic than I can be. So thank you. I'm happy to be here. You know, when we were talking about how we could make this topic a little bit more interesting, then let me share with you how to figure out how to do a budget. Nobody wants to do budgets, right? Yeah.
No, and quite and I think you'd agree with this that if we get to the point with a client where if I have to make you cut out eating out, now you've got to be really overspending in that area. But if you have to really cut down your eating out, that plan is probably not going to go anywhere. And depending on the recommendation, I'm looking at a lapse. That plan is not going to proceed because we're cutting out that enjoyment factor. And if I have to get down there, it's like, look, we're probably not going to do business together, but you do need to evaluate your budget and how you're allocating. But it's more than that, which is what we're going to be talking about.
Yeah, for sure. You know, I in 28 years in business and 25th year as a CFP, I have never once found anyone that said, "Oh, thank God I finally found you. I've been looking for somebody to tell me how to cut back on my lifestyle, how to stop doing, how to do less of the things I really enjoy so I can give you some more money." Yeah. Yeah, that line is a very short one. That's and yet there, that's the kind of stuff that the financial pornographers, the Susies and the Daves and those people. That's the kind of stuff they're talking about, right? Give up your enjoyment so you can give me some money, and so you hopefully can have something in the future. Nobody's looking for that.
Heaven help them. And here's the thing, though, is that they think that that's what all financial advice is.
Mhm.
And granted, they primarily serve a good niche market, and those people need financial awareness to be able to see the path that they're on. Is it going to take them to where they eventually want to be? And that's really the definition of financial planning. No matter how one goes about it, whether it's investments, insurance, or a combination of whatever it's going to be, it could be all rental real estate. I don't care what it is. It's bringing the future, realizing that if I don't do something about the future, I'm going to have a default future as opposed to a designed future. And what can I do about it today to create the future that I want? But hopefully, let me enjoy my life while I'm doing it.
You mentioned Don Buddy, and I've spent a lot of years around Don Buddy, and he says, the journey along the way needs to be a pleasant one, and it's absolutely true because none of us are guaranteed tomorrow. There's those people who, and you've seen these kind of clients, right? They don't spend any money. They save everything, and they don't enjoy life, and they have all this money put away. Now this is not the majority of people, but they save. They don't want to spend money on anything, and then they die, and they never enjoyed anything along the way. Well, that's just as bad as the people who don't save anything and just spend, and then they find themselves at retirement going, well, I got this lifestyle that I'm now accustomed to, and I have no money to continue it. So both ends of the spectrum are the same issue, right? Because we're not guaranteed how long we've got, and the journey along the way does need to be a pleasant one. So how do we come up with a formula, or how do we know, are we likely to get, what's the probability of getting to the top of the mountain, if you will, to use the imagery that you guys use? How do we get to retirement? How do we get to the top of the mountain and hopefully have enough money so that we can successfully get down the backside for both spouses if they're married? And there is I think again, if you've spent any time with Blanton and Money Tracks, or even in the Leap world, I learned a long time ago from Bob Castellone that people need to be saving 20% of their gross salaries every year in order to have any chance to make it financially through, for the rest of their lives. And as well as I do that there are very, very few people that are saving anywhere near 20% of their gross income. That I don't know what the average savings rate is today. I know at one point there during the 2000s it was negative, and then it was in the 1, 2, 3% range. And even if, as interest rates have been higher, I think people tend to save a little bit more. But even if it's 5, 6, 7%, which I don't think it's that high, it's still nowhere near 20, which is why people are taking so much risk in their lives. They're putting all their eggs in the investment basket and in the risk basket, hoping for these high rates of return. And then they make bad decisions. I think I've heard you talk about the best way to be poor is to buy high and sell low, and that's what most people do financially. And it's a recipe for disaster. And what I have discovered, and this is this kind of lead into the stuff that you and I wanted to talk about today, which is, why do people make the kind of financial decisions that they make? They think quite often that they're making them from a conscious place, a place of consciousness, when in fact their unconscious mind is controlling their behaviors based on the belief systems that they have and the emotional baggage that they have from what their experiences in life. And we don't even realize why are we afraid of something, or why are we willing to risk something, or why do I do what I do with my money? And it's not a conscious thing. It's an unconscious behavior. And most people don't figure it out. And I would suggest that the reason that the majority of Americans who get to retirement and are not financially prepared, it's because they've not addressed the real issue going on, which is, why am I doing what I'm doing with my money? You can financially educate them as much as you want. And as we get into my story, we'll find that it's not just limited to those without financial education who make stupid decisions. There's reasons, I'm the first to say that I'm the poster child for this experience of, why have I done what I've done with my money, and why don't I have anything to show for it? So it's a problem.
I got to tell you, that's so refreshing, because I'd say over the past few years, I think we're seeing far more authenticity from the financial services industry. But before that, it has been primarily a lot of positioning, posturing. I'm the greatest and the best. I've done everything right. And quite frankly, anybody that hasn't, you just kind of want to sock them in the face, because it's like, you ignorant I can't even think of the word, but still, I'm like, and you're here going to lecture me, and yet I've been through, and I'm going to list off the thing, because I'm writing this thing about the battle scars of business, the battle scars of life. And you've got divorce, IRS audits, you've got bankruptcies, you've got foreclosures, and all these things that can happen to people. And you're trying to say, I've done everything right. Go away. Let's get real. Just like therapists, they don't necessarily say that they go see a therapist, but they often do, because they're a little bit more aware of their own mental dialogues that they have. And I need a little bit of help, and they're too close to the problem to help themselves solve it. And I think it's so neat to be able to see this within financial services. I try to be as authentic as I can. Of course, I don't air all my dirty laundry. Not everything is ready to be shared, but at the same time, when someone is willing to share, and I think of another speaker, I'm sure you know, Van Miller. Van Miller, when he speaks in front of a client, he says, look, I failed for 16 years. And he says that he was the worst agent possible. And then he learned from somebody, and he's been on essentially a journey of repentance and redemption ever since, at least if you hear him speaking. So it's very unique. And I want to share a different idea, because it just came to my mind as you were talking, was Chris Gardner. Chris Gardner, the movie, The Pursuit of Happiness.
Yep.
And aside from just the movie, I've seen him speak. At least I've seen the videos of him speaking. And one of the things that still is with him today, that he shared in his speech, is that he still keeps plastic bags. Remember, he was homeless for a while. If that bag is intact and it's solid, it's a good. He's got a room full of bags. Now he's got a big house, and so he's got probably a nice sized bedroom sized closet that he keeps all the bags in. But he knows that's a residual thing. Call it a financial tick, if we will. That's a residual from his experience of having been homeless for a period while taking care of his son. And at least he knows where he can track that behavior from. He's okay with it. If he wasn't okay with it, he wouldn't have shared it that way.
Yeah.
But we all have our different things, whether it's from childhood or other, and we could call it trauma. I'm not going to necessarily call it PTSD, because I never want to take anything from military, but yet we all have different things that we've gone through, and we realize that there's been an impact on that. So please, I hope I set you up well to go to your next bullet point here.
Yeah, you bet. So talking about, him, he literally has emotional baggage, right? He's
Yes.
he's got emotional bags from his emotional baggage, and
Yes, he does.
so let me just share kind of what my story is and how I arrived at this conclusion. So as I mentioned, I've been in financial services. So I actually have a computer science degree from Purdue University. That's what brought me to Houston 30 some years ago, 1991. Gosh, 34 years ago now. Working for a big oil company and as a computer programmer, making decent money, making good money, frankly. Cushy, easy job, and found myself burned out after 5 years, unable to get out of bed, depressed, and it wasn't fulfilling for me. So was working on my MBA at the University of Houston, and I got a call from a recruiter at New York Life, and he said, "How would you like to sell life insurance?" And I said, "Not only no, but F no," right? I dropped an F bomb on him, and he said, "Why is that?" And I said, "Because the only thing I can think of harder to sell than life insurance is maybe used cars, because back then used cars were harder to sell." And my brother had already failed out at New York Life, and he said, "Well, so why are you interested in financial services?" And I said, "Well, I think people are going to need help with their investments." And so, long story short, I ended up starting with New York Life. And to take a page out of Van Miller's book, by that point, Van had already become successful, I think. So I took over his role as the worst life insurance agent in life insurance. I shared with you last week when we talked, David, that in my first 5 years in the business, my first 3 years, my first 3 years in the business, I sold 5 whole life insurance policies, and 3 of them were to myself in order to keep my contract going at the end of the year. That's how bad it was. And it wasn't until I was introduced to the LEAP system that I began to understand, how does life insurance really fit into a comprehensive financial plan. I was already now working on my CFP. That's when I passed the exam in March of 2000. I started teaching the CFP program. And then about a year or two later, I was asked to run that program. The whole time I'm building my practice and doing all these things that the financial pornographers are out there talking about, helping clients, and it wasn't working. And it wasn't until I was introduced to LEAP and I began to understand, okay, well, now I can understand how life insurance really plays a significant role in a client's overall plan. So I started using that, started doing it.
So
And I was
let's
doing
pause
it.
for a second,
Yeah,
because I'm
sure.
hoping that one day we'll actually have consumers listening and like, what the heck is LEAP? And so
Yeah.
let's explain a little bit about that, because it does stand for Lifetime Economic Acceleration Process.
Thank
It
you.
seems to be one of the primary first ways, first of all, for insurance agents to understand the power of life insurance, so that they can use that as a template to communicate the benefits to their prospects and clients. And so it's a communication platform. Some people who don't like it will call it a sales system, but it really is about explaining the benefits so that someone actually, and this is key, so someone actually wants to buy it for their reasons. They see the wisdom of it, so they can harness it, as opposed to being sold something that is really not in their best interest. Would you say that's true? You've been no, you weren't a sales trainer for LEAP, but you were pretty darn good with it. So I want to make sure
Yeah.
I'm pretty accurate there.
Yeah, that's 100% right, and thank you. One of my feedback points usually when I'm listening to podcasts and people start using acronyms, and I'm like, you need to explain the acronym, and here I go dropping, acronyms like LEAP. So thank you for clarifying that.
I'm pretty
But
good
yeah,
with that. So if I find some more, we'll pause. We'll explain it. Hopefully, I know what you mean by it. But
yeah,
this one I knew because I
great, great.
learned this LEAP system as well back in 2008 in one of my first agent experiences. Although I chose to be recruited as opposed to being called, do you want to sell life insurance? For me at the time, I was like, I don't understand why anybody in the right mind would do this. But I want to go join an agency and learn from them because hopefully they might know. They kind of didn't, but it was a start of a long term journey. Anyway, I apologize. Go ahead.
No. This is all good, man. And so I'm doing all this planning, and I'm doing what I can to help people, and I was incorporating in my life the concepts. I did buy life insurance. I was putting money in my 401k and all that stuff before I realized that wasn't such a great idea. Got a different perspective, um, and then some of those things that you were talking about earlier. Life happens, right? Divorce. Um, Luckily, knock on some wood, I haven't had any IRS audits, but I've been through a couple divorces, and luckily I'm gonna keep knocking here. No disabilities, no, none of the other things, but life happens, and I started looking at why are we doing the things we're doing with money, and it wasn't really until, and no, I'm not embarrassed to say it. It's just what is. It's been a pretty recent understanding on my part as to what really was driving my financial behavior and my financial decisions. So I'll accelerate the story a little bit. In about 2007, a client. Remember, I started in business in '91. So about 2007, a client. I was sitting in his office waiting for him to get off the phone so we could have a conversation, and looking around his office, and up on the wall he had a shadow box, and inside the shadow box were some certificates of completion and a broken piece of wood and a 4-inch rubber cockroach laying on its back down at the bottom. And he got off the phone, and I said, Randy, dude, what's with the cockroach? And he said, well, I'm so glad you asked. I took this leadership training and it changed my life, and there's cockroach tied to it. And he said, I think you should check it out. He said, changed my life, and I think it would change your life too. And I've always been interested in personal growth. And I said, hey man, you think it's for me? Then I'm in. And I signed up, and I paid the money, and it changed my life. It changed my perspective on just on how I was showing up in the world, right? And like most things, and you can kind of see the pattern in my story, is that when I really grab onto something, I have found that the best way for me to learn something is to offer to teach it to someone else. And so that's how I got into teaching the CFP program. That's how I got into teaching at the University of Houston. I'm like, look, I want to ingrain this stuff. So many people sign up for things, they get it, then they put it on the shelf, and they don't use it, and they wonder why it doesn't work. You got to take action. And so right after the class, one of the owners of the company said, hey, would you be interested in being an assistant trainer with us and helping other people transform their lives? And I said, I'm in. And so I started doing that. And from 2015 until COVID unfortunately shut us down in 2020, I had put my planning practice on the back burner and was focused on this personal growth, leadership development training. And that's where I was introduced to neurolinguistic programming, NLP, and this idea of that we all have these limiting beliefs, and where do they come from, and how does our unconscious mind work? And I was just fascinated by it because human beings, we only use about 10. We only achieve about 10% of our potential. 10%, and it's probably a little closer to 5. And so, what if we could just tap into a little bit more of our potential? And the way we do that is by creating new awarenesses. And we also only spend about 5% of our time in our conscious mind. 95% of everything that happens in our unconscious or subconscious mind. You can use unconscious and subconscious pretty much as interchangeably. And what's stored in our unconscious mind are emotions and our beliefs. By the time we are 18 years old, 99% of our belief system about everything is firmly in place. And you haven't even really begun to experience life yet. So you think about who's I surrounded with, who raised me, what were their values, what were their beliefs, and they impart that stuff on us, and uh, then we just accept that as the truth. Well, it's not necessarily the truth; it's just our truth. And what we have to understand is that they gave us what they had to give, and maybe what they gave us was what the rules were 40 years ago. I mean, you've probably heard people, when I tell people, don't pay off your house, and they're like, well, but if my house is paid off, no one can take it away from me. I'm like, well, no one can take it away from you as long as you're paying your mortgage too. And I said, where does this belief of, if my house is paid for, they can't take it away from me? That comes from the Depression and laws that changed back in the 1950s. The laws haven't been this way for 75 years, and people are still making financial decisions based upon rules that haven't existed for almost 100 years. So where does it come from? It comes from their limiting beliefs, something that someone told them, right? Or they experienced something in a certain way, which made them understand, oh, this is how it works. No, that's how it worked for you in that case. It doesn't mean necessarily that that's how it works. And so all that
There's
stuff,
such lazy advice out there, or unexamined advice, that's still perpetuated because, quite frankly, we're all lazy. Let's take another one, and I know you'll understand and believe on this one, because if we think about the saying, you'll retire in a lower tax bracket.
Right.
Well, where the hell did that come from? Well, I know exactly where it came from. It came about because ERISA, which is the law governing retirement plans, came about, 1974. Yep. What was the top tax bracket in the 70s? It's an easy answer, because, and thank you, David McKnight, for making sure we all know this one. But in the 70s, the top tax bracket was 70%. And as long as you retire lower than that, you will be in a lower tax bracket, which is not hard to do. But what happened in the 80s? Reagan changed the tax code, and then the top tax bracket was, at the time when it changed, like 1986, whatever year it was, 28%. And it's steadily increased and bounced around. It has not really gone past 40% that I can remember off the top of my head. But we're still saying you'll retire in a lower tax bracket, all because we're not re-examining the advice. So all this stuff keeps being perpetuated as though it's gospel truth. Well, they told it to your parents and grandparents, but that doesn't mean it still holds true today. And so that's one of the things that you've done, things I've done with my blog, things I've done with this podcast. We look at some of this advice and we take it out of the drawer. Let's use the drawer analogy, right? Take it out of the drawer, take it out. Let's look at this thing. Where did this come from? Does it still make sense? And if it does, put it back in the drawer. And if it doesn't, take it out and throw it out. And realize there's got to be a different way to think that is more examined in a more refined way, that's current, that applies to the rest of us.
Exactly. And, Don Blanton, I mean, the man is an absolute genius, and he has taught me so much. But one of the best phrases that I ever learned from Don Blanton was, if what you knew to be true about fill in the blank turned out not to be true, when would you want to know? And what's so brilliant about that question, David, is that it's all psychology. All this stuff is psychology. And because if you say, well, when I retire, I'm going to be in a lower tax bracket, and I say, well, no, you're not. Now we're just having conflict, and it's just about right fighting now, right? And you're going to defend your position. It's why people arguing about politics on Facebook is such a waste of time. Nobody's changing anybody's opinion, right? They're just right fighting to be right. And so as soon as you challenge someone, when we say something, the other person unconsciously, so I said that only 5% of the time that we spend is in our conscious brain. 95% of the stuff happens in our unconscious mind. And there's some different numbers but the numbers that we use in NLP is there are about 2 million bits of information bombarding us in any given second. 2 million bits of information coming at us from our periphery, from directly in front of us, from all of our senses. And our brain, our conscious mind, can only handle consciously about 126 of those 2 million bits. So what
Wonder my
happens?
eyes are tired at the end of the day. I swear, my eyes are so sore. Must be all this time in front of the damn computer screen, but that explains a lot. Okay.
Yeah, because there's so many things, right? There's so many things that are going on around us that right now, the fact that it's cold outside and that, there's snow on the ground, that I can see the snow, but that's not relevant to what I'm talking about right now. So what happens is that our brain, so we tell the brain, this is what's important, this is how to focus on the 126 that I'm interested in right now. And everything else either gets deleted, distorted, or or there's another D, and I'll think of it in a minute. But it just, it like blocks it out.
Diffused. I can think of it diffused because you're just not paying attention to it. It's in the background. I'm thinking of, and this is me being a Star Trek nerd, I'm thinking of an episode of Star Trek, and there's a huge computer virus eating away at the computer. Of course, the computer's controlling everything, including the turbo lifts and the door opening and everything. This is stuff you don't think about, but yet the virus is having an effect on like 80% of all the ship's systems. Yeah. And you realize there's a big problem here because the things that you want that are unconscious that just work aren't necessarily working. And so that's just an example of bringing the unconscious, the diffused awareness, and making it conscious now to realize, okay, you got a problem.
Yeah. So what happens? So the way it works is when we speak, our brain listens to what the other person is saying, and it tests, am I in agreement with what that other person is saying right now or not? And it happens literally instantaneously. You just did it when I made this statement. You didn't realize it, right? So you're listening to me, you're like, do I agree with him? Okay, maybe I do. I'll keep listening. But when the unconscious mind goes, no, I don't agree with that, our brain shuts off, stops listening, and now we're just waiting for the other person to shut up so that we can tell them what we want to say. So when we say it, they question it. It's why in sales, when we share something with somebody and I say, look, you're not going to be in a lower tax bracket in the future, I make a statement. Now they're going to question whether that's true or not. And does it fit within their comfort zone? You talked about we're lazy. We like to stay in our comfort zones. So does it fit with my paradigm of my truth? And if it does, I'll keep listening. And if it doesn't, I'm not paying any attention to you anymore. I'm waiting for you to shut up so I can defend my position. So when we say it, they question it. However, when someone else says something, they believe what they're saying is true. So the way we turn that around is, instead of making statements, learn to ask questions. Because if I ask you a question, whatever answer you give me, you're going to believe is the truth. And so the psychology around it is to ask it in a way that I limit the number of potential responses that you might give. I can't control what you're going to say, but I can ask questions in a way that I have a pretty good idea of what your answer might be. So when I say, if what you knew to be true about being in a lower tax bracket in the future turned out not to be true, when would you want to know? There's only 3 answers to that question. Well, I wish I had known back when I did whatever I did. Well, sorry, I wasn't there then. I can't fix that. I want to know right now, which is the best answer we're looking for because I happen to be here right now. And the third answer I'm also looking for is, I don't ever want to know. Because those are the know-it-alls that can't be helped. They need to go listen to Dave and Susie, and you're not my guy. You're not my client. So what happens as soon as they say, I want to know right now, what it literally does is it clears their mind and opens up a space of possibility for you now to give them some new information and tell them what you were going to tell them anyway, but do it in a way where they can receive it and hear what you're saying instead of just fighting and defending what they believe to be true. So, that's how communication works. That's how the brain works. It's how the unconscious mind has all this stuff in there. And wherever they got it, who taught you that? Well, mama, papa, mom, dad, grandma, these people love me. They wouldn't steer me wrong. No, they wouldn't steer you wrong. They love you, but they only can give you what they have to give. And what they have may be completely outdated, as you pointed out. So
And I
that's
prepared this one in advance because everyone does the best they can with their current knowledge, their priorities at the time they make their decisions. I mean, but Jim Rohn, I'm sure you've heard a lot of Jim Rohn. Jim Rohn says that sincerity is not a test of truth. So sincerity is a test of sincerity to make sure that yes, they have your best interests at heart based on where they're at in their understanding. So we're not saying that they have evil intentions. We're just saying that maybe we need to take a look at things a little bit differently. But we're not demeaning anybody. We're not, like I said earlier, we're not shaming anybody. We're just let's re-examine.
Well, let's talk a little about shame. You use that, and I was gonna bring that up. So, you know, it goes even deeper though than the things that we can think about what we've been told and why we might choose to do certain things. It's the deeper emotional stuff. Call it trauma, call it emotion, right? There are things that happen. So by the time a child is 7 years old, about 60% of their belief system is already in place. So again, and they're just little sponges, right? They just absorb. They see and they absorb and they observe and they listen to the voices who are telling them this is how the world is, right? And I can go back and tell you. So let me tell a little more of my story, and then I'll connect back to this point. So and I want to say two more things before I share the story. Vulnerability is strength, not weakness. Now, I'm not talking about military vulnerability, right? We don't want to be vulnerable in our military, but the more, and you said this, you said this a little bit ago, right? The authenticity and being honest and upfront, right? It takes more courage to be vulnerable than it does to hide behind it and not tell the truth. So vulnerability is strength, and life is what it is. So my personal story is I've been doing this financial planning stuff for 28 years, and I personally have blown through two life-changing inheritances with very little to show for it. And I know better. And I teach people and I guide people every single day in how not to do that. And yet when I had this, these life-changing hundreds of thousands of dollars show up in my life, and within a year or two, nothing to show for it, but maybe some memories. I'm
Which is
like,
not a bad thing for the memories, but
oh no, that's the life. That's the journey along the way needs to be a pleasant one, and the journey along the
right.
way has been pleasant. Yeah, but what do I have to show for it? Understanding that am I saving 20%? Am I doing all the things that I'm telling everybody else to do? And if I'm not, the question is, why not? So I go and I have to start digging in like, dude, what are you doing, man? WTF? What is going on here? And what I came to understand in working with a coach who helped me understand, look, you've got a belief system in place that's guiding your behavior around money that says you're not worthy. You're not worthy of money. I'm like, well, where the hell did that come from? And he said, well, let's talk about that. So tell me some stories. Tell me about your history growing up. What was money like? And I started telling him the story. My mom and dad, they were small business owners. I grew up in an upper middle class family. We lived in a relatively small town, about 50,000 people, but the geographic area has a couple 100,000 people. So it wasn't huge, but it wasn't 300 people. And we were upper middle class. We could do stuff, but my dad had he had very poor health. He had a lot of medical issues, and they were self-employed. And my mom knew that at some point, because they didn't have health insurance, at some point my dad's health was going to be bad enough that they were going to need to have a bunch of money in order to pay for his care. So she would squirrel money away. She literally, when she died, we had to go through her clothes because she used to pin money in the sleeves of her clothes. We had to go through all of her stuff because she would squirrel and hide money, right? And it was like, why? Why does she have this belief? Well, she believed that dad was going to need all this money. But as a result, what I heard, because I can almost remember the day we were going school shopping. I was probably, I don't know, 10, 11 years old. This would have been like in the late 70s, early 80s. I wanted a pair of Nike sneakers and an Izod polo shirt. That's what I wanted, right? Why? Because all the cool kids had Nike sneakers and polo shirts. And here's what mom said: we can't afford it. We could afford it, but in her mind, we can't afford it. And so these Kmart shoes, the K Swiss or whatever they were, and the polo
shoe
shirt.
stores. I'm telling you, I'm a
That's
graduate
it, baby.
store.
Yeah.
XJ 2000s. I'm telling you.
And the polo shirt with the turtle on it instead of the alligator is good enough.
I always had to have the dragon or the alligator. Yeah,
Yeah.
And I was in second grade when all that stuff was important to me. No, you and I, we didn't talk about this when we talked last week. This is so similar to mine. Only, and I'm not going to get away from your point, but I grew up in Santa Ana, later moved to Irvine. Now, those are two different worlds that are right next to each other.
Yeah.
And when we finally moved to Irvine, we were in the lower part of upper class. Okay, so we felt a little bit of pressure. We knew that the mortgage was a little bit higher. My dad also had his own health challenges, but as a government quasi-employee, he had the government health care program. So he still had to pay for it, but it was still there. Yeah. So we didn't have that kind of mentality there, but we did have somewhat of a seasonal business because it was in a government building, and it was a cafeteria. First job I was fired from, by the way, age of 13. The secretary of the corporation made sure I was hired back on the next week. Thanks, Mom. But yeah, I think we find maybe it's a common thing for when we're growing up in a small business household. And it's not just health. Now, you were talking about health concerns. That's a bigger deal than necessarily just weathering the storms of a seasonal cash flow and business. They're different things, but yet we internalize messages differently as we're growing up. So I want to share with you, we've got some similarities here, my friend. So
what you'll find, and so as people are listening to this, it may not be that same exact thing, but there are similar experiences. Right. So that's the first one I can remember. Now, fast forward, I get in the financial services business. My dad, I said, Dad, I'm leaving my job at the oil company, and I'm gonna go sell life insurance for New York Life. That's the dumbest thing you could ever do. Right. Okay, well, you're self-employed. I want to be self-employed. I want to be in control of my own thing. No, you don't. You need to work for a company and whatever. Okay. So I start with New York Life. I get my CFP, and I say to my dad, Dad, I got some understanding now of what's going on, and will you let me help manage your financial assets? He said, you're not capable of managing my assets. What I hear, you're not worthy. So all these different things, right, that were said to me, that were done, again, not, my dad wasn't a bad.
The timing of that message, I mean, that's right when you first graduated. And by the way, that Dunning-Kruger effect, which is a whole psychological thing, that at the very beginning, at the highest of your chutzpah, highest of egos, and you just graduated the top type of program, CFP. It's the number one credential program out there for financial planning. I have different letters to compensate, but just to say, but and now you're coming back down because they're like, wait, experience and everything. They don't see you that way. They see you as you're the kid that still did. I changed your diapers. And however you did in school, you did in school, right? They are thinking about all the past things because they know your entire life, as opposed to this is the accomplished person you're becoming now. So I can see that, especially when you're early in the career. Almost happened to me later in the career, but at this point, I was just like, Dad, if you're not going to let me do this, there's no one else that's going to be better qualified at this point. But so I had a different perspective when my parents finally retired about 5 years ago, due to COVID, actually. So yeah, the timing of those messages is very interesting because the younger we are, the more impressionable we are, and we might take things without the proper perspective. So when I talk to another mentor in the business that most people really would not have heard of him, but he says it's very rare that people actually do business with family. Now, keeping that in mind, okay, now that sounds like a normal thing, even though what are we taught when we first joined a larger insurance company? Here's your Project 200. I want you to talk to everybody that has ever known you your entire life, and you don't know what's
Right.
going to happen, but let's go talk to them. I'm like, really? Those are the people you have the worst positioning with, probably. And
They
yet,
all know. They all know we don't know anything, right?
yeah.
It's the
But of course,
sympathy.
we're supposed to bring them in to talk to someone else that's supposed to know. Yeah, I got it.
Yeah. It's the sympathy vote. We're playing on the sympathy vote, right? So what it does, David, all these experiences, you remember I said there's 2 million bits of information. We can only consciously focus on 126 at one given time. Here's the key point though. The unconscious mind, it sees all of it. It only lets us consciously see what we say is important, but it hears and sees all that information, and it stores it literally like. So imagine you in your brain. This was explained to me this way, and I thought it was really clever. Imagine in your brain you've got closets, and every time you have an experience in life that creates a certain emotion, your unconscious mind goes, "Oh, that's sadness. That created sadness. Let's put that experience in the sadness closet. Oh, that's guilt. Let's put that experience in the guilt closet. Oh, that's shame. Let's put that in the shame closet." Just like, oh, that's joy. Let's put that in the joy closet. That's happiness. That's gratitude. That's whatever. So we got like two sides of a hallway. We got negative closets on one side, and we got positive closets on the other side. But our unconscious mind, it's a very complex, but it's a very simple thing. So it doesn't, our logical brain, our conscious brain, we get very, very detailed. The unconscious mind stores everything sort of as like just like a picture. Okay, we call it an internal representation. So if something shows up that kind of looks sort of like something else, it goes, "Oh, I recognize that. That's guilt. Put that in the guilt closet," right? So it's like big picture. Well, as that crap and stuff and those stories continue to get stored, the closets get really full, and that's where the limiting beliefs are. That's where the old stories, whether you literally were told you're not worthy, you're not good enough, from people that you love and care about, that shit all gets stored. That stuff all gets stored in the closet. And if we don't find a way to clean out the closets, and that's really what forgiveness is about. So as I started to learn more and more about this, I'm like, okay, so how do we move forward? How do we change the behavior? How do we change the dynamic?
Moving forward, because I'm still stuck on the closet here, because I'm also thinking that as we're accumulating all of this unresolved emotion, because all money, all financial decisions have an emotional component to it.
Yep.
There are times where you can think of that, you're having a tough time and you lash out, right? We respond instinctively, and not necessarily a good way, but you're responding to whatever happens because it's overwhelming you, because you're being brought back to that same mental state or emotional state. And I can imagine that unless we go to, and I'm thinking about the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, one of my favorite books that I happen to have read when I was 18. By the way, I got far more education after high school than I ever did during high school. That's when I was introduced to Jim Rohn and Stephen Covey and all these other people. I'm like, okay, this is a different way of being. But Stephen R. Covey in the 7 Habits talks about response ability and showing that our ability to choose our response. So we need to pause from the stimulus of whatever's triggering us at the moment. Say, hold on, what am I feeling? Why is this happening? And you can choose your response. Otherwise, all we're doing is apologizing later for the speech that was so good at the time, but you're going to regret it later.
And that's a great example, David, of the unconscious mind is where those emotions are stored. And unless you tell the unconscious mind, these are the 126 bits of information. So if this emotion shows up, unconscious mind, I want to slow down enough to recognize that, oh, wait, that's one of those 126. So I can consciously do something different and respond instead of react, right? That's how quickly the unconscious mind, it's going to, so because one of the functions of the unconscious mind is to preserve life, right?
Yes,
Our
it's a protection
unconscious mind,
mechanism. Yes.
our parasympathetic uh, system. There's another word I'm looking for here, but that's all right. It's hell getting old.
No.
But
I think I'm the youngest one here. Kurt, you're 53, I think.
Oh, I'm the oldest.
You're muted, my friend.
Awesome. I'm 55.
I'm 54.
All right, so
All
we're
right. Well,
basically
I just
saying
turned 47, so I'm good.
I got you by a couple months, Kurt. But
Yeah.
nervous system, the parasympathetic nervous system. But that's what, our unconscious mind beats our heart for us. It breathes in and out for us. So we don't have to consciously think about, oh, it's time for me to inhale, right? So our body and the unconscious mind's number one job is to preserve the body so that it can live. And so and our oldest alligator brain, right? There's only three things the alligator brain does: fight, flight, freeze. So when something shows up that triggers you, that's your alligator brain going, I'm choose to fight here, or I'm choose to react, right? And so all that stuff is happening literally in a nanosecond. But when we can focus on being more intentional and understand these things, we can change our behaviors, right? Our behaviors are not ingrained. Well, they're not. You can change them, right? They're not permanent.
Right.
We change our behaviors. So what I've learned is that in order to truly affect change in our lives, there are 4 steps that you have to go through. Most people do 1 or 2 of the 4. Almost no one ever does the most important, which is the first step. And that is, you've got to learn to release the emotional baggage. You've got to clean the closets out. Because if you're like, okay, I want to change my behavior around diet, let's say. Okay, so I got a goal. So here's the 4 steps. Release emotional baggage.
I feel called out.
Yeah, no, most of this is just me projecting my shit out there. Okay, so
okay. This is therapy for all of us. Yeah,
it is. Yeah, through the lens of Kevin. So we got to clean out the closets and basically clear the page. Once we've cleared the page, then we can set our outcomes. We can set goals. This is what I want. Now that I don't have all this negative crap in there, now I can focus on what I want. That's the part that sometimes people get, like, oh yeah, I'm gonna set some goals, right? And you wonder why. This is a perfect time of year talking about it. So why do people have New Year's resolutions, and usually by about this time in January, they're all back into their lazy comfort zones? Because they've got old stories out there that they didn't do the first part. They didn't get rid of all their stories about their body and why why they have this reaction to food, and whatever their stories are, they didn't deal with that. And so they just set the goal. Well, it's pretty predictable how that's going to turn out. But if you clear the emotional baggage, if you clear the limiting beliefs, you clean out the closets, and it's like starting with a fresh page, right? So imagine your life is like a painting. Everything that's happened, it's on the painting. And if you want to change the picture of the painting, if you don't turn the page and start with a clean sheet, it's going to take a lot of repetition to paint over what's already there. It can be done, but all the stuff that's already on the page, that's all that stuff. There's good stuff there, but there's also a lot of stuff that's not true. And we've got to turn the page. We've got to get rid of all that crap so that we now can truly focus on what we want. That's step 2. Step 3, you got to do the work, right? I mean, once you set the goal, you got to take action. You can't just sit there. People think the law of attraction, the secret is, oh, well, I set the goal. $1 million is going to come to me, and I'm sitting here watching Netflix, and there's no $1 million. Where's my $1 million? No, man, you You got to go to work, right? You got to take action. And then the fourth step is you got to focus. You have to learn how to, as you're taking the action, look around what's changed, stay focused on what the outcome is, and then work within the circumstances that show up. And ultimately, it will lead you to success if you follow the plan. But because people don't ever clear the page, they don't clean out the closets, they're just painting over the same picture, and it's highly, highly predictable that they're not going to achieve what they want. And so the question then becomes, well, how do we clear the page? How do we let that crap go? And one of the easiest ways to do that is through forgiveness. Because forgiveness is not for whoever you are forgiving. It's not for them. It's for you. And literally what the purpose of forgiveness and what the act of true forgiveness does is it disconnects the negative emotion that is tied to the event that created the emotion in the first place. It doesn't say the event never happened. It doesn't say it's okay that what the person did. What it says is that I'm no longer going to let that past experience or that past story about me, I'm not going to let that affect how I move forward in life moving forward. Yeah, I understand what happened, and I'm going to use that. I'm going to learn from that, right? But I'm no longer going to allow that past event to come into this present moment and affect what my future looks like, because that's literally what happens. Every time we think about that event, we pull that sucker out of the closet, and it generates the emotion. The unconscious mind goes, hey, you reached into the shame closet. You want to feel shame? Here we go. Pull it out. And we got it. And by forgiving, we can disconnect that.
And I can imagine this is not, especially if you're married, this is not a one-person job. You can't have one person trying to work on themselves and the other spouse essentially, I can imagine this, kind of been there. But if you're trying to work on yourself and the spouse just keeps poking at you, that's not a safe space where you can actually heal. So the harder part might be, and if you and your spouse are on two different pages, that might go beyond coaching. That might mean you need some marriage counseling so you can try to wipe the slate clean, get some new. I'm going to use the Stephen Hart, 7 Habits here, the new emotional bank account, so you can make deposits into the emotional bank account. Because sometimes might think you're making deposits and they see them as withdrawals, which means you cannot win no matter what you do. And so there's a lot of emotion there, and those triggering things, you can't share them with your spouse if you're not on the same page. If you can't share those, and at the same time, if you're being triggered, I almost hate using that word only because of the common use of it in the media, but yet it's true. And if your spouse won't let you take time away, and especially for men, but women and men are different beings, guys. I don't care what certain people might say. We're completely different. We're wired differently. And for a man, sometimes we need to get away so we can process how we're feeling, so that we don't make the greatest lecture that we've ever made that we'll always regret later on. So being able to allow that space is so important to make sure everybody's on the same page. And we're not marriage counselors, guys. That doesn't mean we don't understand relationship dynamics. But I mean, we can't necessarily help you to follow through that. But if we can identify that and realize that you guys are not on the same page, it might mean you can't be my client right now, but that doesn't mean that you're not beyond help. There's other ways to address these things to make sure that, because once you're on the same page, it could be magic. You can have a wonderful relationship and succeed financially once you're there, once you're equally yoked, to quote the Bible that way. There's wonderful potential there. But if one of them, and I'm not saying that I was the one that was always in the lead. Maybe I was the one sandbagging. I don't know. I look back and sometimes I think I've got some unresolved things from my first marriage. The question is, am I bringing that same person with me into, not by bringing the same person that I am, who I was, into the next marriage? If you don't change, it's just going to be the same. So
Perfect.
I had to bring out the couples dynamics.
Yeah, and what you've just described is why my second marriage ended, and why my third marriage, my present marriage, is so is magic because we are on the same page. My second wife, the mother of my children, she was unwilling to kind of go on this journey with me, and so we were talking about two different things, and we weren't operating from the same space. And the future's pretty predictable when that happens. And so, and another thing is that this doesn't just apply to our money. It applies to every aspect of our life. It applies to relationships. It applies to our health. It applies because it's all the same thing. We've all got baggage and beliefs about all these important areas of life. And if we don't deal with that stuff, you absolutely will bring into your next relationship all the shit that didn't work in your last relationship unless you deal with it. But you don't know you're bringing it in. You think you're just being you. And so
everybody else is like me. So everybody's the same, right?
And it's a lot easier. The hardest person to be honest with you is yourself. The personal growth is uncomfortable because it means we have to look at ourselves in a way that says, I got room for improvement. The biggest house in the room is the room for improvement. And we all have it. Right. But so many people, it hurts, and it requires some effort, and it requires you to do some things that it may be painful. And what's on the other side of it? What else is possible if we truly understand what else is possible? How could I live a life? And I know we're kind of up against the hour here. I don't know how long you guys, if you go over very much, but one of the
we
things
go over all the time. The question is
are
we on topic, and is it interesting?
Okay.
We'll see.
Yeah.
Usually Kurt's messaging me saying we got to wrap this up, guys. No, I think we're okay right now
Okay.
because this is so important. Sometimes this is so much more important than just understanding financial strategies, because I don't care how smart you are. If your relationship with yourself and your relationship with your spouse, if it is not going well, everything else goes out the window.
Right.
It's going to sink. And by the way, divorce is expensive, especially for men. So, if we get our relationship with ourselves, being real with ourselves, and I'll put it this way, a real man is going to look themselves in the mirror and try to figure out, they may not know what to address yet. But let's say, if it's me, where do I need to address? What can I do? And don't be afraid of that, because you don't know where it's going to take you. Now, at the same time, it might take you to a little bit of depression. We talked last week. I have my depression area, and I think you said you did too. At the same time, depression, if it's toward the path of healing, don't be afraid of it, as long as we're moving towards something.
Yeah.
And so I think there's always a light at the end of the tunnel. Hopefully it's not a train, but there's always hope there. And even if, and we talked before, even if our earlier financial lives weren't as well as we would have liked, we've got plenty of time. At least I look at it as I've got plenty of time. There's always ways to make up for those things. So the question is are we afraid of looking ourselves in the mirror? And do we know where to get started with?
And that's where the vulnerability is so important that I talked about, right? And as men, we generally, we got belief systems. We've been told men don't share their feelings. Men
don't cry.
Men don't cry. Well, then why do we have tear ducts, right? Awesome. Don Buddy says, people will listen to you. You can talk as long as you want, as long as you're not boring, right? As soon as we get boring, okay, I'm done listening to that.
Well, let's talk about some numbers then. No.
Yeah, no, let's not. Please, God, no. But it's so true. And forgiveness, the first person we got to learn how to forgive is ourselves. And so you mentioned that at the beginning, right? We're the only one that's here for us. Yeah, we got some other people that are cheering for us and that are on our team and that want to see us be successful too. And we're the only person that we're with 24 hours, 365, right?
For better or worse, but yeah.
For better, yeah. But we got to learn how to get right with ourselves and how to love ourselves. And once we clear out the closets, once we get rid of all the negative shit that's there, that's not really benefiting us, right? Other than we learn a lesson from it. So that's reframing, right? How do we take the negative stuff that's happened in our lives and turn it into a positive? Well, What lesson did I learn? And am I behaving differently? My first divorce, which I told you I'm on the third one, so it's either 3 strikes and you're out or third time's a charm. I'm not sure which. I'm going with third time's a charm, and because I'm a positive guy. But my first divorce, I was only married for a couple of years. It was my college sweetheart. She told me on my 25th birthday that she wanted a divorce. Happy birthday to me. That was fun. That was a fun one. But I'm so glad that she did that now, not then, but now, because I look back and I go, what did I learn from that? Because if I had said, she's just a whatever, she doesn't know and she's just this awful person, I'd have taken that same negative behavior, the things that made her not love me anymore, I would have taken those same behaviors into my next relationship, and I wouldn't have changed. I wouldn't have looked at it, and I'd have just repeated the same thing over and over. That's what people do. So as men, we're taught, don't ask for help, right? It's weak to ask for help. Figure it out yourself. That's BS, right? Men don't share their emotions. That's BS. That's why we die of heart attacks and strokes and things that because we bottle that crap up all the time, and we don't learn how to release it and how to let go of that emotion. And then, like a volcano, right? At some point, as that pressure continues to build and build and build, eventually that volcano is going to erupt, and it's going to be devastating, and it's going to be violent. And that's what happens in our lives when we push down all these emotions, and we don't learn how to let that stuff go. When it erupts, people are affected, people are damaged, people are injured because we explode, right? Physically, emotionally, verbally, whatever. So it applies in all the areas of our life. And when we learn, and so forgiveness is just one, but it's an easy one that you can literally learn how to do. I've got a 7-minute video, not video, 7-minute audio of there's a Hawaiian forgiveness ritual called Ho'oponopono, and it literally means forgiveness. And it's a visual, kind of, you think of it like a meditation, if you will, where it guides you through how to truly forgive people, and how to disconnect the negative emotional energy. 7 minutes. I mean, I do it every night, right? And I do it at the end of the day, so that anybody that I've shared some negative energy with, the guy that cut me off, whatever, the guy on Facebook that, that said, I was bald and whatever, right? Whatever it is.
For you.
Okay. I appreciate that, man. but I don't need that negative energy. And if I learn how to cut the energy and truly forgive, and just kind of wipe that page, now I can start from a new place of love, right? And so that's really what it's about, is how do we take the negative, let it go, and put more stuff into the positive closets. Gratitude, love, right? The high vibration emotions, enthusiasm, excitement. How do we have more of that in our lives and less of all this negative crap? It's a choice, but you got to learn kind of how to do it. And when you figure it out, and whether you start looking at it from your financial life, you look at it from your relational life, you look at it from your health life, I don't care what area of life you look at it, the same thing applies. You got to clear the baggage, then you got to set outcomes, you got to do the work, and then you got to focus and figure out what's working, what's not working, and stay focused on the outcome, and eventually you'll be successful. And I don't care what area of life it is, it's the same. For me, it's had the biggest impact on finance, because I knew better. I knew better what to do with the money. And yet it was gone, and it never crossed my mind. If you'd have asked me, do you think you're worthy of money? I'd have said, hell yes, I am. But that's not what my unconscious mind believed. Consciously, I'd have said yes. But buried really deep down were these old stories. You're not good enough. You don't deserve it. You can't handle my money. All these things. And that's what my unconscious mind believed.
And trying to, I'm going to use the old phrase, trying to convince ourselves against our will, we are of the same opinion still. That's a Dale Carnegie quote. And yet if it's unresolved, right? And it can bring about an imposter syndrome within ourselves. Like we're going to work. And the problem with an imposter syndrome is that you're working against yourself. You have to fight with yourself to get you to do the things that you should want to do automatically. And that's the hardest battle, which is why, for me, I've had to clear out a whole lot of stuff. Now, I didn't have the benefit of having a coach to help me go through this. I'm just trying to figure out stuff that comes to my mind. Like, where did that come from? Okay, I'm going to write a blog article on it, or I'm just going to write out my thoughts or just try to process this and move forward on it. And it's not an easy thing. But I'll also say that sometimes having gone through these things and coming out the other side will bring about a new mission, a new cause, a new crusade. So for me, one of the impetus of my divorce, and I've only been married once, thank goodness so far. I'm open to the next one, but we'll see whenever that comes about. But part of that, and we talked about this, is that I had such a miserable experience with my first insurance agency. I barely made anything. And one of the things that drives me is that if I can help someone determine first, is this a good career for them or not? And if it's not, get out now. Don't sacrifice. Now, if you're going to have a divorce, you might have a divorce anyway, but I don't want this business to be the impetus of that. As part of that, the Facebook group has grown to over 13,000 insurance and financial professionals around the world, which is amazing to me, a huge number. And I feel a sense of responsibility for that, because if I can help someone be successful, I want that. I want them to avoid the pains that I went through if it's avoidable. And if it's not avoidable, figure it out now. If I can help save someone from that pain, I want to do it. And it's been my life for a long time. That's one reason why I'm writing this other course. It's meant for insurance agents and financial advisors to help make sure that they can do things better from day one, rather than having to learn from experience. Experience is the worst school to go to and graduate from. What is it? That's called the School of Hard Knocks. I do not need a PhD from the School of Hard Knocks. I mean, let's get in and get out. That should be a correspondence class if I can make it. I mean,
Yeah.
Let's figure that part out. But yeah, it's a journey, and if we don't examine those decisions, it becomes a lifelong journey, and we stay stuck in the same habits, the same patterns, and that's no good.
And the future becomes predictable, right? And the problem is we don't even realize what's driving it. The body, we tell our unconscious mind what is important to us, and if we're not telling it consciously, this is what's important to me, it's just going based on whatever programming you've done up until then. Another good way of thinking, another good analogy here is, some people got old programming. They haven't updated their operating system in their body. They're still operating off of Windows 95, and it's time to upgrade to Windows, to whatever the next level is. But it literally is just a reprogramming of our unconscious mind. And if we're just sitting in our comfort zone and we're just operating based on past behavior, the future is very predictable.
Absolutely. All right. I think we're coming up on the end of our message here, so I'm going to show a couple of these here. Alonzo, yes, he is a CFP instructor.
I used to be. Yep. I used to teach the CFP program. I used to run a CFP program here in Houston. I haven't done that for a number of years. Now what you want to go ahead and put up my newsletter thing there, David. Oh, so now what I do is, while I still am in financial services, I still do work with clients. I do some joint work, but really what jazzes me is working with people, coaching people, helping them understand how this stuff works, helping them get rid of their emotional baggage, and really live the kind of life that they want, how to have more abundance in life, how to have more positivity in life, how to have more self-confidence and self-worth. That's really what jazzes me and what I'm focused on. So I've got a newsletter. It's a periodic newsletter, and by periodic I mean whatever period I decide I'm going to send it out. It's when I send one out. It's not bi-weekly. It's not weekly. It's not daily. It's not weekly. It's not even bi-weekly. It's periodic. But if you scan the QR code there, it'll pull up your email, and you just send me an email to Kevin at Life Wizard Coach. So Kevin at lifewizardcoach.com. And just say newsletter, and I'll be happy to add you to the newsletter list, and you can kind of understand what I'm doing. My newsletters are about the three things in life that I think I have some experience in. Sometimes they're about personal finance. They certainly are about personal growth, and then neurobiology, this stuff about how does the unconscious mind work. That's kind of what they're about. So there you have it.
There you go. Alonzo's already subscribed, so check your email.
Awesome. Thank you, Alonzo.
Now, and so in addition to that, one of the things I hope also comes across is that I think, and I'm going to show a very biased opinion here. As you try to, when I know something's biased, I usually preface that. You want to work with, and this is for the public here. You want to work with someone that you can share your emotional feelings and your journey with, and you're not going to feel judged. You're not going to feel shamed out of it. You want someone that can listen and help you, maybe even process it and such, and realize, okay, you've been along your journey where you've at now. Now where are we going? And being able to confide with that advisor. So quite frankly, I think we fit that category, but we're very biased in that opinion right now. So I just want to say that I think that's important so that you can actually share those feelings with, and quite frankly, that's where the relationship is built. It's not just how brilliant we are. Yes, we're brilliant, but it's not just that. If we have that connection and we can share that journey. And when I think about my why am I in this business for the clients? Now, for what I do for the industry, I've got that mission driving for me. When I think about my why, I want to be a part of their story. I want to be a part of their story of being successful today and for the future, and ideally for multiple generations. If I could have that kind of impact, it's beautiful. But it's not just being financially smart. You got to have that emotional security, that emotional intelligence that you can inspire that and create those kinds of plans, and people love you for it. That's what drives me. And I think I could tell that from you, Kevin. That's all you, my friend. I mean, and
that's it.
Kurt, you haven't said much, but I know that's you. We all want to make that kind of impact, and it makes it more exciting when I think about the stories. And if I can have that impact on hundreds of families, wow, life well spent, right? So despite
absolutely.
everything of the past.
One of the things that that I've learned, again, we have mentors, we have people that teach us, people come into our lives for various reasons at various times. And one of the most powerful things I ever heard was a guy, he was the CEO of, for a period of time, I worked for Caliber Collision, which is the world's largest collision repair company. And
touch my car, but okay. Yeah.
and the CEO at the time, he used to say to the team members, he'd say, "What business are we in?" And they would say, "Well, we're in the collision repair business." And he would say, "No, we are not. We are in the people business." And so I would say, I'm not in financial services. I'm not in coaching. I'm in the people business, because it is about the relationships. You can do transactions with anybody. You could transact with a robot. You could transact with it's not about the transaction. It's about the relationships, and it's about the impact that we make on people's lives. And I just want to leave this place, better than I found it. And I know that I've touched people's lives in a way that will last for generations. And you're absolutely right, man. The feeling that's the legacy of, when I'm dust in the wind, that people are still going to be impacted because of something that I did. It's very, very powerful.
It's huge. And that's what we're all about. All right, my friends, we are well past our normally scheduled time, but I think this has been well worth it. Kevin, thank you so much for coming on. You're helping us to kind of see, we're all ocularly impaired, but see the lenses that we see the world in, and question the lens on that. And it's so healthy to do. And you have to be brave with yourself to do it, and even braver to do it with your spouse. But it's a well worth someone's time to do that. Thank you so much for coming on, guys. We'll be on again, planning on next week. I don't see a reason why we wouldn't. And we're going to keep going on, and maybe we'll even have some more insights. Don't hold me to that. I don't remember what week 3 is, but we'll catch you all next time. Thanks so much for watching and listening. Make it a great day.
Thanks.
You have been listening to an episode of the Financial Advocacy Podcast. As a reminder, you can't hold us accountable for any actions you take on your own. Just like all financial entertainment shows, we are not providing legal, tax, or securities investment advice of any kind.
So, ladies and gentlemen, there you have it. The Financial Advocacy Podcast, which are definitely friends and partners of mine. I do a lot of work with them. And I want you guys to understand that when I do these, it's definitely a great idea to post your questions here. Yes, I do have a wealth of knowledge, but my goal is that you understand that I'm not alone. I do work with other people who have as much knowledge, if not more than me. So this isn't just something that I pulled out of the air, and that was the purpose of me showing you guys the books. So that's going to be it for today, folks. Make sure you, or before I end, it's your boy, the insurance junkie, your fiduciary fella, the all-star advisor Alonzo Hall, your social media insurance brother. And I've just whapped and tapped on your head with some more financial advocacy podcasts. With that being said, ladies and gentlemen, wipe ass, work in progress every day and see success. And remember, folks, when people challenge you, they don't challenge you to challenge you, but they challenge you to challenge you. Accept the challenge. Salute.